Digital media ethics are the most insightful and useful overviews and analysis of ethical levels of new media. They examine unique ethical difficulties, practices, and norms of new media. In the following presentation, we are going to explicate, distinguish, and discuss media ethics and digital ethics, press codes, and furthermore outline ethical principles governed in a digital media environment.
For one to understand the difference between digital media ethics and media ethics, one must first define ethics. Ethics attempt to outline what is right. It is that branch of philosophy that deals with what ought to be done, with what kinds of action are good, and with personal values and individual character. Andrews defined ethics as standards that guided the behavior and actions of public officials in public institutions and which may be referred to as moral laws. However, laws and ethics are not the same. Law states what a person is required to do. Ethics suggests what a person ought to do. Now, media ethics has to do with standards and practices of the media. Since the media is made up of individuals, when we speak of media ethics, we are talking about the ethics of individuals. Media ethics is viewed as a branch of philosophy that assists journalists to determine what is right and how to choose the best from several alternatives. It is safe to say media ethics is the study of journalistic behavior, specifically the right and wrong of how media practitioners do their jobs. It involves defining the values of the individual, organization, profession, and society and using those values as a basis of human behavior. It is not the same as morality. Media ethics is related to duty, duty to self, duty to community, duty to profession. For instance, would it be ethical to get a job as a cleaner in a police station so I could search for a report that might prove the station commander is accepting money to dismiss rape charges? So, ethical behavior involves a choice. So, ethical behavior involves a choice. Sometimes choosing one good over another, sometimes choosing to do wrong in order to accomplish some good. On the other hand, digital media is any form of media that uses electronic devices for distribution. We are currently living in a fourth industrial revolution, generally referred to as the digital age, where most of the information is in digital form. So, some examples of this digital media include games, social media, Facebook, blogs, and others. Now, digital media ethics deals with the distinct ethical problems, practices, and norms of digital news media. In simple words, digital ethics is the study of how to manage oneself ethically, professionally, and in a clinically sound manner via online and digital mediums. For instance, psychologists who uses the internet or cell phone must look at issues such as what can their clients find out about them online? Is it ethical for them to Google their clients? Those things, those kind of things. So that's the difference between media ethics and digital media ethics.
The Press Code of Ethics has been formulated in the belief that newspapers and the people who produce them should adhere to the highest standards of ethical professional conduct. The relationship between the two is that they both deal with the highest ethical and professional conduct of journalism. Journalists must, in all their categories, publish and broadcast news based on their belief about what is right and what is wrong. The common reason is giving out the set of guidelines that managers, employees, and agents must follow in the organization. The first aspect is the freedom of the press, which is the primordial factor of these kinds of media. The media are required to provide the society with the information that is necessary for informed social decisions and to act as a watchdog of anything that is happening. The press is no longer emerging like in the past because of digital media. Many media broadcasters are now working from their homes as commenters, journalists, and editors, while there are other journalists and editors working in the newsroom. In some matters, newspapers are now changing to adapt to the digital media platform for society to have ethical news. We have instances like ENCA Online and we have SABC Online, where we can get ethical news from a trusted broadcaster.
The universal ethical issues are not suitable to deal with digital news reporting because the invention of the internet and innovative digital technologies have brought radical changes in the media practices very often known as online media. The advancement of new technologies can be observed throughout the whole communication process. Advanced equipment and unlimited availability of sources in internet make easy for information gathering. Various software makes easy for proofreading and editing audio. Satellite and the internet make easy to disseminate information to the whole world in a very short period of time, and the internet makes easy to increase interaction with audience. The use of internet as a media has changed the contemporary definition of what is journalism and who is journalist. An incident somewhere in one corner of the world becomes global in no time due to social networking sites. So the digital media have raised profound ethical challenges along with ongoing changes in journalism and media practice. Using spy tools unknowingly and hacking digital data to obtain information, using software to falsify photographs, audio and video documents, plagiarism, privacy, those are some of ethical challenges experienced vividly along with penetration of new media. Journalism is being transformed by the digital revolution. Journalists working for media organizations are having to file and update stories across multiple platforms under increasing time pressures. Meanwhile, anyone with sufficient literacy skills and access to the internet can aspire to practice journalism, and many are doing so. And yet, journalism in any form still depends for its legitimacy on the observance of ethical principles and practices. For instance, it has to maintain a commitment to telling the truth and to minimize deception and betrayal, deal with conflicts of interest, protect sources and their confidences, know how to report on traumatized and vulnerable people, and know when to respect privacy. Speaking of knowing how to report on traumatized and vulnerable people, on September 11, 2001, four jets were hijacked in the United States almost simultaneously. One crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and a second crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers overwhelmed the hijackers. The other two jets were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, filled with jet fuel for transcontinental flights. The planes brought an inferno or fire to the buildings, killing more than 2,800 people. Some of those people trapped on the upper stories chose to jump 100 stories to their death rather than be burned to death. This is a tragic event. This was one of the worst in the history of the United States, compounded by the fact that it was not a natural disaster. Then a picture of a man jumping appeared in newspapers the next day, including the New York Times and the Washington Post. The pictures brought cries of sensationalism from readers and viewers. So, was it essential to include at least one picture of someone who chose to die that way rather than to perish in an inferno that eventually collapsed? Is it ethical to post the graphic pictures? Was it an invasion of a family's privacy? Prior to the rise of the internet, journalists were the undisputed gatekeepers of the public sphere. Through codes developed by their professional associations, to a large extent, they determine the ethical rules to be observed. However, today the internet has transformed the public sphere. open the new gates and diminish the power and authority of the media. I think to address the undergoing ethical dilemmas, the journalistic code of conduct should be revised. Media ethics needs to be rethought and reinvented for the media of today, not of yesteryear.
Amid the occurrence of the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to the lockdown of the country that comes with the strict laws and regulations of which limits the physical activities for citizens. In this state, digital media plays an important role in this pandemic, thus to disseminate information, reporting news updates, and the state of health as far as creating awareness. Ethical principles such as truth and accuracy, accountability, responsibility, independence, and minimizing harm have played a vital role amid the COVID-19 pandemic. During the coronavirus pandemic, there was fake news circulating on the virus itself, remedies and cures, and conspiracies of how the virus came to be. With journalists now competing with everyday people to be first to break the stories, some journalists disregarded some ethical principles. The journalists, doctors, and some citizens were held accountable for misleading the public and causing mass hysteria. The aforementioned ethical principles played a vital role in keeping everyone in check.
We can conclude that ethics around media and digital media have not been wielded ever since advanced technologies and new age media came into existence. For instance, how online journalists mostly report about stories on what is acceptable to them only, being biased and sometimes subjective. This proves that the media fails to perform the set code of ethics placed in the digital media space. Sometimes the media performs activities which might endanger an individual to an extent that it can infringe the right to privacy of a person, which is both ethically and morally wrong. This creates and increases difficulties and universal issues in the digital media environment. Thus, there should be strict rules and regulations enforced in the new age media space because the new media call for new ethics because the issues online journalists are confronting are different from those that traditional journalists face.